everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and it's a Tuesday with my kids back in school. It's a very exciting time to be alive. Snow days are no more, but Joe days are here. Hello, Atletico Madrid Joe. I think that's Atletico Madrid Lowry. There we go. That's the way to do it. Mr. Lowry, how are you today?
I am great. I'm jealous. I think I would rather have a snow day than a Joe day, if I'm being totally honest. I know that's me probably as a desert dweller. I know Jeff's going to have a different take. I like Joe days. Like, I get to be a part of them. That's always very special. But snow day sounds pretty unmatched. I would take one of those right about now.
They're pretty fun. Jeff, do you, living in Minnesota, get just sort of bored and used to, like, winter weather and snow? Is this just like an ever-present thing for you from, I don't know, October until, I'm assuming, May?
Just about, yeah. It's part of the furniture, especially if you're good at snow sculptures. I'm mostly just, like, sad about the idea that Joe would rather live in a snow globe than be himself. But I guess if you've done the old Joe routine for years and years, why not try the novelty of
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I've been there. I've done that, you know, just like Pitbull. Like, we've gone through that before. And I'm ready for a change. I wasn't picturing that my snow day was going to happen in a snow globe. That sounds mildly terrifying and deeply unsettling. So if that's the scenario, then I'm ditching my original plan and I'm going back to being me. But otherwise, I mean, like, I'm just picturing Calvin and Hobbes basically when I think of snow days, because that's the closest reference point that I have. That sounds pretty idyllic. Maybe a bit like narcissistic also, but it sounds good.
I'm into it. I would enjoy a Joe day. I feel like Joe celebrates his birthday right when he goes around and gets all the free stuff.
Food, baby.
So
Make them work for me one day of the year, you know?
Well, we are here to talk all things Major League Soccer. There has been quite a bit of activity. We're going to talk moves that have happened, moves that have not happened, moves that might happen, and try to get into the whole entire situation in Vancouver. No big deal. What could go wrong? Let's start off with Obed Vargas, shall we? Obed Vargas moving to Atletico Madrid. Is this happening, Joe? Where are we in terms of the permanence, the likelihood of this move?
It's done. So that I can say with absolute certainty, not from any inside info, but because both teams have posted about it, so that's good to see.
Insider Joe Lowry says it's done.
I'm putting in work. You can quote me on that. It's done, by the way. That's pretty good. This is a huge move for Obed Vargas. I was thinking about this in the context of the biggest clubs that MLS players have moved to directly from MLS. And I think it's clearly in the top 3 of that, and probably not third. Alphonso Davies going from Vancouver to Bayern Munich is number 1. And that Alphonso Davies has been so good for them for so long is just a delight. And MLS doesn't really have another story quite like that. The next one that's already happened that I think is probably in the top 3 is John Duran from the Chicago Fire to Aston Villa, where he was really good. And going to a moderately large Premier League club, which is bigger now and better than most every other club on the planet. So that's in the top 3. I think Obed Vargas going to Atletico Madrid is in the top 3. And Atleti is a bigger name than Aston Villa and probably on balance has been a better team than Aston Villa. This is a big move. Like, MLS wants more of these moves. When MLS created the U22 initiative, which has been a giant flaming failure, basically as far as I'm concerned. But when they created that, these are the kinds of moves that they've been trying to create. They've been trying to prompt these things into existence. It turns out that Obed Vargas and the homegrown route, even though his path was quite traditional coming from Alaska, is a far better way to create opportunities to sell players than the U22 initiative is, although John Duran was a success on that front, I suppose. But still, this is a big move. It's a big move for Seattle. It's a big move for Obed Vargas, especially. I think it's a big move for MLS. Even though the fee is not large, it sounds like 3 or 4 million, depending on kind of who you ask. ESPN's reported 4, maybe a little bit above 4. Some folks in Seattle have reported 3. It's not a big fee. He was on the last year of his contract. It was never going to be a huge fee. But this is a big move, and congrats to the guy for earning it, because I think he really did earn it.
How do we think he fits in at Atleti, Jeff, if you had to guess? Not necessarily locker room vibes. More so, we're talking, a 20-year-old midfielder, played at the U20 World Cup with the U.S., has 2 caps for Mexico now after the one-time switch, has plenty of experience in Major League Soccer. Do we feel like this is him going into Atleti to compete for a spot right away? Do we think he's going to be a bench player, squad player? None of the above? How do you see this playing out right away?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, first, the locker room thing, you can't ignore it. Like, he grew up as a fan of the club, right? And I think that this is the club that he claims in a lot of interviews that he's done with myself, with Joe, with others, has said, like, you know, this is a club I admire, I love. Club World Cup, it was certainly an angle. There's, like, this funny thing where the Seattle Sounders post an article on their website where they're like, he's playing his boyhood club. And, like, but I thought you were his boyhood club. Like, how are we defining this? So that was weird. But now he's actually part of the club. And I think that when you look, they've actually been, to scale for Europe, a pretty injury-free team. So the depth chart looks about as full as they want it to. And so I think at this point, when I spoke with Obed last summer, he was really realistic and said, I realize that I'm probably not going to walk into a Champions League club's lineup, but I'm hoping. At the time, the leagues that were really interesting to him were La Liga and Liga NOS in Portugal. And so, I kind of wonder if he needs to be either loaned down next year, or to start the season, and then maybe this year he's integrating into the locker room, working into training. They're kind of getting a sense of what profile they want him to fill. How is he going to complement or surpass Johnny Cardoso, another young midfielder that they brought in from the CONCACAF region, of course. But it's just really exciting because I think that when you look at his ceiling and his potential as a player, I think that he has shown so much acumen at applying his work rate in more intelligent ways with each season. There was a really common Obed Vargas trait about 2 years ago where he'd get into the final third, he would try to play across, someone would block it, and then he would lunge to try to get the ball back and foul the guy, and then possession changes hands. He's not really making that sort of challenge anymore. He's a little more nimble about it. His trade-offs in when he joined the attack were getting smarter last year. And so I think that sort of positional awareness actually will help if you comes in as a 15 to 20 minutes for the Copa del Rey or for La Liga or did they advance even? Yeah, the Champions League was such drama last week. But I think there will be competitions for him to feature in, but I would imagine that he'll need regular games next year, and I'm not sure if he's quite there. But that doesn't mean it's a bad move for him whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't expect Obed Vargas to hop immediately into Atletico Madrid's lineup or necessarily even their rotation. I will say Johnny Cardoso's gotten 700 minutes for Atletico Madrid this year, and I think today Obed Vargas is a better soccer player than Johnny Cardoso. So I don't think it will be. It could happen sooner than we think, maybe is what I'm trying to say. I think that is a piece of this equation. I also think Obed Vargas is just such a Diego Simeone player. The dude rolls up his sleeves. I posted this yesterday on social media. But the Obed Vargas moment that stands out to me is him playing against Messi in Miami in the Leagues Cup final, the game that Seattle win quite handily. Obed Vargas body checked Messi multiple times. I believe he bottom checked him to the ground at least once in that game. If that doesn't scream Diego Simeone player, I don't know what does. So I think he's going to endear himself very quickly in Madrid. I think he is a good player. Whether or not that means he's going to get minutes for Atletico Madrid, I don't really know. I don't feel so strongly about him that I think he is obviously going to be a superstar. I don't think he is even necessarily one of the absolute best young players in MLS. He's certainly one of the better ones, maybe in the top 5, top 10. I think there are better talents with higher ceilings than Obed Vargas in MLS, but the dude is a player, and I could absolutely see him playing in La Liga for the next decade.
Flipping it around and look at the other side of this, as Joe said, not a huge fee, only a year left on his deal. Jeff, we now have an Obed Vargas-shaped hole for Seattle. How do you feel like they go about replacing him?
With a very Obed Vargas style piece coming from the academy. Get ready to learn Snyder Brunel, guys. He elevated. He was kind of their only summer signing last year. A homegrown deal, had been playing regularly for Tacoma Defiance. He is another one who can do some number 6 stuff, do some number 8 stuff, has a good work rate. What he adds, though, is that sort of late arriving shooting acumen that has made Sebastian Berhalter so important for Vancouver and has started to pop up sometimes for the United States. And it's just really vital if you're going to play with a 3-man midfield to have someone with that skill. Now, Seattle has over the last year and a half played with a double pivot with Roldan and Vargas, of course. So the question will be, is Snyder Brunel ready to take on that many minutes that quickly and be that sort of, bouncing all over the field, and he's responsible for all that space. So that's where signing Hassani Dotson comes in. And I would imagine that, in the interim, this elevates Hassani Dotson from being one of the first guys off the bench for rotation purposes to being a regular starter. So, that's faith in his recovery from his injuries, which he has done a couple times in his career. And, but I think that's a pretty ideal sort of player in prime, young player on the rise scenario that they've created here. And they probably assume that they just have to wait half a year to start this sort of process if Obed didn't go when he went.
Yeah, I think they pre-planned for Obed to leave by signing Hassan Diaz and by also trading for Nikola Pekovic from Charlotte, although he is more of a project maybe even than someone like Snyder Brunel is, even though he's a little bit actually maybe they're about the same age. Either way, they've got young players across Brunel and Pekovic that they've clearly identified as being options in that part of the field. They've got other players as well coming through their system. I mean, Seattle have created a pro player pathway, easy for me to say, that is basically unrivaled in MLS, and so they want to move players like Obed Vargas on so that they can have the next players come through the academy or through Next Pro or draft them or however they're going to do it. They want to see this happen as a proof of concept, and part of planning for that sort of thing and wanting it to happen is preloading your roster so that you're not scrambling when all these things are coming together towards the end of the European window or basically right before your season starts. I think Hassani Yatsen is absolutely still a starting quality number 8 in MLS. I mean, he is maybe not going to bring you some of the same highs that Obed Vargas would have, but I don't really blink at all in terms of Seattle's trophy chances after this move, which is a real credit to how they built their roster. I think Vargas, again, is a good player. I think he's a replaceable player in MLS, and I think Seattle have done a pretty darn good job of getting about as close as they could to replacing him already with what they brought into the team.
So we've had Obed Vargas now move to Atleti. We've had Alex Freeman move to Villarreal. Joe, do you have thoughts on who is like the next young MLS player? You can define young however you want, who is going to make a move, maybe a big move, not maybe as big as like a top 3 move, but maybe top 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know based off of where these players will actually go. We talked about Luna last week, I think, on USMNT Weekly as a player that's drawing interest from La Liga. Xavier Gozo, his teammate, Tom Bogert, and others have reported that I believe Atletico Madrid is also interested in, along with some other high-level European clubs.
Yeah.
Aston Villa, there you go. So another names that we know are shopping in MLS. Villarreal, we know is doing it. These other teams are doing it as well. As far as the domestic players, it's Gozo and Peyton Miller for me. And we've talked about Peyton Miller a whole bunch. And Gozo, frankly, recently on the show as well. On the international front, like young international players in MLS, there really are 3 that came to mind as I was thinking about the aftermath of this Obed move. Manu Dua in San Diego at center back, who I think is the best of the bunch. Owetu Makanya in Philly, who seems to be sticking around, at least at the moment, in Philadelphia. Maybe it's a little too early to be saying that at this stage of the window, but he's somebody, and then Matteo Silvetti in Miami. So those are the 5 guys. Oh, and maybe I'll toss Julian Hall in there as well, because of the Red Bull connection to Leipzig. He feels like somebody that could just end up at the older sister club and actually play for them at some point in the next 3 or 4 years, because I think he is that level of a prospect. But those are the names that I would have shortlisted to maybe follow the Obed Vargas line here.
Jeff, would you add any names to that, or are there any of those names in particular that you think are more likely than others?
Yeah, my list had 4. I think the Xavier Gozo links are fascinating because that's not a profile of player that we've actually really seen clubs of this stature look at. They're usually looking at central midfielders or defenders, right? Maybe goalkeepers, sometimes with Gaga Slonina, but you're not really seeing them actually look for kind of nimble wingers and attackers. And so that's also a really encouraging sign. That's maybe Kevin Sullivan knock-on effect, even though he's a couple years away from going to Manchester City. The couple other players, Peyton Miller, I agree, young left-backs are always in vogue, and MLS young left-backs have a pretty solid hit rate of at least staying pro for 5 years afterwards, right? Like if you look at George Bello, John Tolkien, Caleb Wiley now, right? Like I think that's another profile that they would look at. David Martinez, I think, is one that we probably shouldn't have fall off the radar in LAFC because especially with how that situation is looking right now with we'll talk about in segment 2. We'll talk about Bouanga in segment 2. But depending, if he sticks around, then it's even harder to find where he's getting his minutes. And so even if it's a case of kind of sell to recoup your money and get a sell-on clause and hope that someone else does the rest of his development for you, that would be of use. And then I kind of wonder with how well Rodolfo Borrell seems to be able to navigate the selling part of the transfer market, not so much the buying part for value. But I wonder if at a certain point Owen Wolff is kind of finally looked at as getting that next move. And it might be an Aiden Morris sort of situation where he goes to Middlesbrough, or he goes to like a promotion level championship club and challenges elsewhere, or goes to a different league entirely or a different style of play. But he's obviously been with Austin for a long time. It's kind of hard to see what's left for them to develop with how they've operated sporting wise lately.
Is La Liga, like, in your mind, is this a new development, them shopping in Major League Soccer? Like, who are the leagues that you think of as being traditionally the ones that are going to go after MLS talent versus maybe the ones that are doing it more recently.
It feels like it's been the Bundesliga for a while looking for young American players, right? And La Liga seem to be doing it a little bit more. Barcelona has done it with a couple of guys that haven't really panned out for them. But that's not entirely new on that front. We're seeing Villarreal do it quite a bit, whether it's directly from MLS or getting players that have been in MLS. They've done both of those things. I mean, the reality right now is that every team in the world is looking at MLS for talent. Right? I mean, when you're a league that is roughly a top 10, we don't need to debate the specifics. It doesn't even really matter. But roughly a top 10 league in the world, every team that matters is looking at your players. Now, it's probable that Manchester City is spending less time than Villarreal or Atletico Madrid, but even Manchester City is looking. And we know that they're looking because they're scouting young American players like Kevin Sullivan. So everybody is looking. It just so happens right now that La Liga is sort of like the Bundesliga. It is not the best that is out there. And the teams that are in it, other than Barcelona and Real Madrid, are not the absolute best to have a real chance to win the Champions League. And so MLS, I think, is a logical place for them to look for players.
All right. There we have it. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about some other moves that have happened in maybe rapid-fire succession or as rapid-fire as we can be. We'll see how it goes. Back soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. I have withheld my enthusiasm, tamped it down as long as I possibly can, because the man, the myth, the legend, the Timo, is finally here in Major League Soccer. Timo Werner officially joining San Jose Earthquakes. He has number 11, according to Wikipedia, and that means he's here. How are we feeling about this one, Jeff?
Long overdue, not where we thought he'd go, right? Like, last year we were talking, obviously, about him possibly coming in through the New York and just Red Bull to Red Bull, that sort of thing. So in a way, it kind of feels gratifying that it's like a club that independently vetted instead of taking a hand-me-down, right? So I hope that leads to a better situation for him. Not necessarily the most like glowing of press releases. I love a press release that starts, "We're excited about signing Timo Werner, period," from Bruce Arena. I think that's just like a lovely touch.
Fitting.
It is like a happy birthday sign by Dwight Schrute.
Yeah. It is your birthday. Yes.
It is your birthday, right? Exactly. It's like, he is here now. Congratulations. But, they're still hyping him up as Turbo Timo, like 2-3 paragraphs down, right? And so I think that they are really looking at him being probably on the wing, maybe like kind of a second striker off of a more natural hold-up figure.
Yeah, Bruce Arena said both of those things are possibilities in his presser on Friday.
Excellent. And that's where I'd want him at this point. Don't force him as a center forward, right? Like, I just think that he needs open space to run into, to roam free, and to be the happiest pup he can be. And you'll find that terrain on the flank much easier than you will in the central channel. So I think if they can keep him out there, very different than how Christian Espinoza was helping them be useful in wide areas. And could they have worked together? You absolutely bet, with Timo making that sort of far post run, late run. If they had just remembered to pick up the contract for Christian Espinoza, that ball would have been in play. And honestly, that would have been almost unstoppable. But hopefully someone else can play that ball. I don't know. They'll figure it out.
Oh, go, Taylor. Go.
Well, I was just going to say, Joe, go ahead, and then I'll ask my follow-up. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm like irrationally high on San Jose right now. And I'm having a hard time explaining exactly why. Part of it is because they did underperform their expected goal differential last year, translated into normal person speak. They probably should have been better last year, all things considered.
They created the chances to have been better.
Exactly. Yeah. They've got two young rookie center backs in Max Floriani and Reed Roberts, who will be sophomores this year. And Bruce Arena has tended to do quite well with young domestic center backs. I would expect defensive improvement on that front. I think they're going to be less porous in defensive midfield with Ronaldo Vieira, which is just, that name is so good. Ronaldo Vieira playing at the base of midfield, or whoever it is that's going to be there. I don't think they could be worse defensively this year, because surely Bruce Arena is savvy enough. He is a smart soccer dude to know that their pressing was a huge problem last year. They could not press cohesively worth beans, and they got toasted over and over and over again. It was horrific to watch. Surely with Timo Werner, they're going to play in transition a little bit more, which means they're going to sit a little bit deeper. So I can see some reasons why I am excited deep inside. But the illogical part is, I believe it's 44 goal contributions that they saw walk out the door this offseason. I haven't done the totals for the other 29 teams yet. That's got to be the most in the league, hasn't it? I mean, Joseph Martinez, Chicho Arango, who's now officially on loan in Colombia with an option to buy. I would be quite surprised if he ever found himself back in San Jose. Seems like he's made himself persona non grata just about everywhere he's been at this point. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't seem super likely, but they've lost a lot in the attack, and that's the part that I'm trying to remind myself about. But I just have this sense that Timo Werner is going to cook. in MLS. Like I don't know exactly what the dude has scored a bunch of goals for RB Leipzig at a better level than MLS. We've seen players in their late 20s, early 30s come in whose games are, frankly, still predicated on some athleticism, and that's a lot of Timo Werner's game, and be really good. I would say Denis Bouanga's game is quite predicated on athleticism. I would say Son's game is quite predicated on athleticism. Now, they can do other things that I don't think Werner can do, but Werner might be better off the ball than either one of those guys. So all San Jose, I think, need to be a team that legitimately I could see grabbing the 5th seed in the Western Conference. I think they need a 10. Because I think Preston Judd's going to score a bunch of goals this year. I could see him and Werner combining for 30 goals this season. Maybe even more than that. I think Preston Judd is absolutely a breakout candidate at the 9. Werner, I think, could score 20 on his own. They need a 10. I think that is very clear. Werner's going to be a winger or a second forward. That means that Arena's thinking about playing with 2 forwards. And if you're going to play with 2 forwards, I think you really do need a more creative type in midfield. Sekiris can do some of that stuff. But even though I do rate him fairly highly in MLS, I would still want one more piece. So I hope San Jose grabbed that piece. But even though I feel like I shouldn't, I'm hoovering up a lot of stock in the Quakes.
Jeff, are you also hoovering up stock, or are you politely declining that stock?
Was that the follow-up you've been sitting on?
No, there was something else juicy, and I regret that I talked over it.
Stick the landing. I just would have been so good if you're like, no, Joe's going to give me a perfect tee up here, so I'm going to wait. Because he did. I'm high on them too, and I've talked for how many months on this show about how the West is just this squirrely, like, wide open terrain for any team to walk into and be competitive if they build coherently. And I have a lot of optimism because I like their midfield by and large. I like Ronaldo Vieira. I like how he partners with Bo LaRue. I like having Ian Harkes as kind of a depth piece rather than trying to push him to be, a 90-minute player every single week. I think that bodes really well. And I think that Noel Buck, this is the year where we actually kind of see how he does in a box-to-box role. And the last 2 years have kind of been lost in his development. Now it's time for him to get some minutes. So hopefully we see that. And yeah, I'm with you, Joe. We haven't seen it from Sekiris. We've been kind of hearing that he's on the verge of coming good, right, and being able to have that production. And he did pretty well at the U20 World Cup. So, I'm hoping that with a more consistent run out and a better supporting cast, or a supporting cast that wants to be there, maybe, he can be in a little bit of a better way. The concern, unfortunately, and this is maybe how I've been thinking about this, is why don't the Quakes feel like the Revs felt at the start of the second year of Bruce Arena's tenure there. And I think part of it is because the ownership groups we tend to view pretty similarly. Like there's a pretty similar correlation of the amount of spending that the Revs are willing to do on their first team as the Quakes. The difference is the Revs did evolve for Bruce. Right? Like they did kind of improve their youth facilities. They improved the training ground. They improved some of the senior spend, right? Like Carlos Gil was already there, but they got him a better supporting cast instead of saying, well, you have your headliner, what more do you want, right? Like they would have done for predecessors. The Quakes are still owned by John Fisher, and they're still operating like they're owned by John Fisher, right? And so it was very encouraging to see Timo Werner come in the door, because that is not an outlay that many coaches before Bruce Arena have been afforded in San Jose. I just hope that's not the end of it, because Joe's right. There are obvious pieces that turn this thing from you could maybe squeak away from needing the play-in game, wildcard, Palooza, whatever they call it now, or you're actually the 5th seed, and if any of the top 4 slip, you might be hosting 2 games instead of 1 in round 1. Like it's all there for them. You really hope that ownership continues to support at this level.
And I think Bruce Arena has been pretty public in saying that they have. And you talked about some of the facility improvements in New England. He's talked about how some of those same things have happened in San Jose. I can't remember. He ran through a list, and I didn't write it down. But meal room or like team meeting room, and basically a bunch of facility improvements. Yeah. And you see it in Werner as well, that there is a willingness to spend. I think if those things continue, and Arena also talked about wanting to add 1 or 2 more players in this window. And I mean, clearly they need another piece in the attack. So I would have to imagine that piece is going to arrive. Exactly what that looks like and where it's coming from, I don't know. But I would have to imagine that there's going to be another piece there. I sort of think if you can get Werner to equate to Chicho Arango and his production, and if you can get Preston Judd to equate to Joseph Martinez's production, which I think you can, if you can get the next player to be a provider at the level of Espinosa, which is not easy to do necessarily, so that is still a gamble. But if you can find that piece, all the other pieces should be better. You should be better older in central midfield, which is good in the case of Bo LaRue, more experienced. You should be better really at the outside back positions, assuming Espinosa you weren't sort of imagining as wing back in this case. You should be better in the back line, and you probably are going to end up being better in goal this year. So I think maybe that's, as I think about this more and actually am forced to express my thoughts, which I just keep all this bottled up inside
great.
most of the time. Thanks, guys. That means a lot. I think that's the recipe for San Jose, is that they get the attack back to where it was last year and everything else raises the level a little bit. And I think in general, it's a better time to be a San Jose Earthquakes fan than it's been in a long time.
So using the TSS patented method of how many ifs and conditionals it takes, I believe I counted 4 ifs for San Jose there from
Nice.
Joe Lowry.
That's pretty low for the West.
What is the respectable goal tally for Timo Werner?
Ooh, honestly,
respectable sets the bar low, Jeff.
yeah, it does set the bar low. And I think it's interesting because he's like an attacking focal point who's better off the ball. And there aren't many of those profiles who've been in MLS before. I think as long as you get like 8 goals, 7 assists, and you assume that he's eating a lot of room in the final third away from your strikers, and whether it's Judd or Kikanovic, and they can pick up 4 more loose goals than they were finding in the past. Like that's incredible return. Like I think 15 goal contributions is a good bar to set in general. However you,
I was gonna set it higher. Even at respectable, I was gonna set it higher. Like
set it higher.
I think 14 goals. Just looking at goals, because that was what the question was. I think 14 goals, penalties included, that's fine, would be respectable. I think that would be pretty ho-hum, but it would be respectable. I think the ceiling for Werner is like 22 goals, something in that range. So I would set if the dude scores, what do you say, 8 goals, Jeff, you wouldn't be disappointed? I'd be disappointed.
well, but like again, it's because everyone else is picking up other roles.
Fair enough.
right?
Yeah, that's valid. If everybody
I'm
else's
saying minimum-
production improves at a nice clip, then you live with it.
Yeah.
Minimum 15 goals. That's my guarantee for
Okay.
Timo Werner. I think this is going to be a really good signing. I think he's a player who hasn't been appreciated, who's easy to mock, just as Ryan
He's
Bailey.
kind of a funny
and
player. There's some for sure.
Yeah, but I think he's a player who is going to go to Major League Soccer kind of flying under the radar at the same time, given some of the acquisitions and players that are already here. And I think like in a team where certainly there will be pressure on him, but it's not going to be, spotlight coverage every single week or anything like it. I think he is going to like rediscover some form, rediscover maybe some enthusiasm for the game, score a bunch of goals, look very good. So that is my feeling. Maybe that's because I have sympathy for Timo Werner. I don't know. I also don't know what will happen with Denis Bouanga. Should we talk LAFC for a moment?
Wow. Let's do it.
You weren't expecting that transition that quickly?
No, I was. I just can't believe this is happening, to be honest. Like, Denis Bouanga maybe leaving LAFC was not on my bingo card for the winter window. That's all.
Was it, like, after the Miami rumors and his response to them? Like, did you start to think maybe this is more likely, or were you just locked in now? He's staying in LA no matter what.
I'm just too naive. Jeff's nodding sagely because he's been around the block. I even thought when we talked a week ago, whenever that was, about Denis Bouanga's cryptic social media
1
posting,
week.
I was
It's been 1
it's
week.
going to be fine. Everything's going to come together. They'll give him a new deal. He's earned it, and they have the money for it, and it's going to stick around, and it's going to be Bouanga and Son are the new Joseph and Miggy, and they're going to love each other forever. I guess not, Jeff. I'm too naive, man.
He wasn't happy with Carlos Vela in the locker room with him, right? Like there is that, like this is like always going to be the defining shot of Denis Bouanga and Carlos Vela for me, is that counterattack against Miami where Bouanga refuses to pass it to a like screaming wide open Carlos Vela and instead shoots it to the moon. And like,
wait, is that real? Was there like beef between them?
oh yeah,
That's
yeah. It was like the one time you saw like Carlos Vela like flex the captain muscles and be like, "What are you doing?" and yell afterwards and like point and scream and say, "I know better than you," right? And like when Vela left, Bouanga stepped into leading man status, and he was really happy with that. Got them back to MLS Cup. Granted, Vela had kind of signed back on for a can of corn at the end of the season, trying to do the Gareth Bale routine. And then 24, still pretty happy, still makes a best 11. 25 makes a best 11. Sung Hyung Min comes in. He's not the guy anymore. He doesn't like not being the guy. He doesn't. Like, I don't really know what else to glean from this anymore at this point. Is like, you have the second most famous player in the league. You have one of the 2 best players. We'll see just how many minutes he and Messi each play, but I think that Son is a viable MVP frontrunner this year, right? That's not a hot take. And I don't know, man. Like, I get it in a way. You came here to be a designated player. You came here midway through the 22 season. You're 31 years old now. You don't really want to be pushed off the pedestal before you're ready. But yeah, I don't know. Every time he's in the final year of a contract, he throws fits publicly or has his posse tweet stuff that he can retweet, which is like a real cool way to go about these sorts of things.
Kind of is a cool way, if we're honest.
I know,
to have a posse
right?
that you can retweet. That's pretty hype.
That's just like, yeah, no, you send it. You'll look great. You'll gain some followers, and I'll make my entire fan base miserable,
Win-win.
thinking I want to leave. What could go wrong? Look, man, like, sell him. At this point, he's 31 years old. If you're getting 8-figure offers for a 31-year-old winger who is probably like one twisted ankle or one knee ligament away from losing a lot of his fire, you don't sell your leading goal scorer. He's not your leading goal scorer anymore, possibly. You have your guy. So then you bring in someone who's a more natural complement for young men. You bring in someone who's a chance creator. You bring in someone who's going to be a hold-up man that Son can play second striker off of. You've got a variety of options, your LAFC. I just think at this point, this is like the third time he's gone through this routine with the club, and there's a certain point where I just wonder, is this enough? Like, why do you keep up with it? I don't understand it.
Jeff, you said 8-figure, right?
Yes.
Yeah, if you get
okay.
Yeah, if you get
first
like
I thought you said
13 mil.
6-figure, and I was like, $100,000? That gets the job
Oh, yeah.
done? 8-figure
Get
makes more sense. All
a
right,
cool 250 of GAM and some incentives thereafter if he hits benchmarks.
So,
of course.
All right.
We talked recently when Miami's bid for Bouanga, when Tom reported that at $13 million, and LAFC dismissed it out of hand, and then Bouanga retweets his posse, and you heard the rest from there. We talked about that before. I think either Taylor or I posed the question, would you take $13 million for Bouanga? And I said absolutely not. And Jeff, I think you said no as well. Maybe I'm misremembering, or maybe this all played out in my head. $15 million, which is the recent reporting, just to finish setting the stage here. Fluminense in Brazil have apparently bid $15 million for Bouanga, in the region of $15 million for Bouanga, according to Tom Bogert. That is now what LAFC are being faced with. And John Thornton was asked about Bouanga at a presser earlier this week and about this whole situation. And I think said something to the effect of, we would have to be blown away. And maybe this will do that. Maybe it won't do that. We'll have to figure out what that looks like. So, Jeff, what I'm hearing you say is that you would take that for Bouanga. You would have no issue taking that for Bouanga. I don't know, man. I come at this from a slightly different place. I'm open to it. I'm absolutely open to it. Because you can make the argument even beyond is he no longer the guy, and does he not like that? Now, I had a very different impression of Bouanga and Son's relationship, publicly at the very least, and I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. They've been very, happy and polite to each other and, buddy-buddy, frankly, as far as I could tell. Maybe that's changed, and maybe Bouanga has had an offseason to sort of change his mind on all that stuff. I don't know. I think the argument, if you're LAFC, for selling him is that you think he's 31 and is going to lose something. Which is probably going to happen at some point, right? It's going to be incremental because that's how this works. Yeah. But it's that you can do better, right? And effectively, that's the calculation. They're not going to sell him because they need the money and a transfer fee. That's not how LAFC do business. That's not really how almost any MLS team does business. There are some that do it that way. But really, it's not necessarily about the valuation for LAFC. Even if John Thornton says it is, it's got to be more about the DP spot for them. Is this number good enough that we don't look silly for selling him in front of our fans? So there's a narrative element to this. But it's really, can we do better than Denis Bouanga? I don't know, man. Even a 31-year-old Denis Bouanga, with Son in the team and your trophy window open, it's a big risk. Now, I trust LAFC to make that choice more than almost any other team in the league. But, oh, man, is it a big risk. Because your window is open in a way that almost no other team's window. It's Miami. It's probably you, LAFC, and maybe it's Nashville. But I would have LAFC above Nashville. You are the team in the West. A full season of Son, who I agree with Jeff, is an MVP frontrunner in that he'll be running second behind Messi. But still, I mean, he's going to be ahead of everybody else.
I think he wins it.
I absolutely do not think he wins it. But
I'm leaning that way, Taylor.
I could not even fathom having that take. But setting that aside.
That's my prediction.
Setting that aside.
In your face.
That's the question, right? Will LAFC do this? First of all, of course, because otherwise none of this matters. But if they do it, can they upgrade on Denis Bouanga? And yes, they can, but I don't think it's going to be easy. I mean, guys, do you think that's going to be easy to do for them to replace Denis Bouanga in the year 26? Forget 27 and beyond. I think this is about LAFC winning MLS Cup this year. That should be their goal, is to win the Shield and to win the Cup this year. Mm-hmm. Do you feel better about that, having to go out and find the new player next to Son, or do you feel better with Bouanga? That's a genuine question. I don't know that there's a right or wrong. I'm just saying that's a huge risk.
It is, but is John Thornton still in charge of the the department? Then I'm confident because he's had the hit rate. And I think the other thing is, keep in mind, I know that immediately it's LAFC, so you're thinking like Griezmann, and you're thinking these big names. And Atleti loves nothing more than Major League Soccer, so maybe this is the time. Who knows? But here's the other thing: since the end of 22, when they kind of had to blow up the MLS Cup squad, the area that was impacted the most was the midfield, right? Kellen Acosta fell off a little bit and then was replaced. Ilya Sanchez moved on. Jose Cifuentes was sold to Rangers, right? And since then, they didn't really try to rebuild like a possession hub. Well, it seems like they're interested in that because now there's like a loan with purchase agreement in principle for Stefan Eustáquio, the Canada international. And they can do possession stuff better if they have Eustáquio, who I think is one of the absolute best midfielders in CONCACAF, bar none. One of the best players in CONCACAF. I think that he's actually pretty underappreciated, certainly in U.S. circles, just because we don't see a lot of him between the fact that he plays for the Canada national team that we don't watch as closely and then plays in Portugal, which is a league which is very difficult still to watch in the United States, even in the streaming era. So if you bring him in and if you have his game, you don't really need to get, like, I don't know, like Peak Joseph to make this thing work, right? You need Petar Musa. And I'm confident that John Thorrington could find a striker in the mold of Petar Musa who would work really well as like a possession hub, a hold-up guy, someone Son could play off of. Or just get Petar Musa in the cash market because there's value there suddenly, right? Like, that's what I'm thinking, is like that profile. We were talking about it from before Son debuted, that the player profiles, the positional approaches of Bouanga and Son weren't naturally compatible. Sure. And they made it work, and they made us look like a fool, made me look like a fool to a degree. But I think in terms of sustainability, in terms of both of these players being over 30, I'm not selling Son. He just got here. Bouanga's the piece that you can move to find someone who's a more natural complement. And if he's this crabby, a lot of the fan base is already really sick of his act. If you look at the LAFC subreddit over the last week, which I know is like a vocal minority, but at the same point, like, I think that there are people who will still buy a jersey of someone who's good because their jerseys always look good because they nailed their branding. Like, I don't know. I just think it's kind of time. These are the sorts of personalities where if you keep them in the locker room, sometimes you risk upsetting the apple cart.
It's true. It's true. All of those, I think that's a perfect response, Jeff. Like, genuinely, that is such a good answer to the question that I posed.
Fine, 7 out of 10 maybe.
And you've kind of brought me on board, specifically by mentioning Petar Musa's name. It doesn't have to be Petar Musa, but there's so many things that can go wrong with a transfer. Let's imagine Bouanga is sold for $18 million to Fluminense, and you have a DP spot to fill. Right? I mean, LAFC technically could have two if they offloaded a U22 player, but it seems like they're going to just keep it with the 2-4 model, at least for the first half of the season. Mm-hmm. So you have one DP spot open. There's a lot of things that can go wrong when you make a move, including a player's acquisition to a new country and a new league, a different style, different teammates, different coach, different tactics, different club, all those things, and more, many, many more. If you go out and get someone with an MLS, a third of those concerns are gone. There are still concerns, of course. But, dude, if you could go out and grab Petar Musa for this team, and it does. I feel bad to Dallas fans because I know I bring him up all the time. But if you can go out and grab someone like that with an MLS, and I don't know how many other names there are. Maybe Hugo Kuipers would be on that list, but he doesn't move the needle for me quite in the same way that Musa does.
Yeah.
Like a really good, well-rounded DP9, I think I might be on board. I'd still have to think about it long and hard. Even if I think Dallas would maybe take $20 million for Petar Musa, and LAFC could give it to them. And I don't think it would be a bad move. I think it might make them a little more well-rounded. And it lets them do the things that you said. I have to think about it. I'm still not all the way sold, but that's a really, really interesting one, Jeff.
Can I add one other selling point there for you,
Of course.
Joe? Because I was going to ask this. You all have anticipated it well. And if it is Petar Musa, let's say, there's also the optics of it, right? Where if you're LAFC and Inter Miami come in, if you sell him to Inter Miami, who are like, your closest rival, essentially, for the title
Miami
this
and the
year?
Galaxy, the places that
you're saying, essentially, we can't compete with them. They have the financial might. They have the firepower.
Totally.
Oh, well. If you resist that, then you sell them to Brazil for, let's say, 17, 18 million, and then you're poaching one of another MLS team's top talents. Now you're the one doing it. Now you are the one showing, like, we can flex muscle, we can bring in whomever we want, we can replace a star player with another star player and not even skip a beat, no big deal. So I think there is something to that as well, that when it's Inter Miami, you want a massive amount of money or you're going to pass. But when it's a club where you can kind of pitch it as, we're selling them on, we're making a good profit, and then we're going to reinvest it in a proven player, I think you can make that sale much more effectively.
Totally. I totally agree. And I just scrolled through all of the DPs in MLS from last season. Musa is the only one that I would take over Bouanga. Or like that would make me think. Again, maybe I'm not even all the way there yet. So he would be the one. So there's not like this huge list of names inside of MLS that I would feel great about, because I think it would make sense for it to be a 9. That seems like the obvious one. That if you're going to go out and replace him, that would
like
be
a
the spot that
truer
you fill.
number 9.
Yeah, truer 9 than they have. that would make so much sense as a squad construction mechanism. Musa's the one. So if there's a way to get Dallas to play ball and they like $20 million, then yeah, I would be tempted. Fascinating.
Mateus Klick is in. He's playing for Cracovia right now, but he's around. So if
Yeah.
you need a DP, he can come in, and we know he's a proven quality, proven entity.
Title
what
window
could go wrong?
Yeah, I love it.
Let's do this. Let's take one more break. Then we'll come back. We'll talk a bit about Vancouver, shall we?
Let's do it.
Should be fun, painful. I'm not sure. Back soon.
Necessary.
Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. For segment 3, we're going to spend some time in British Columbia. Is that where Vancouver is? Am I right on that one? Jeff's nodding. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Because we're going to talk the Vancouver Whitecaps. And the reason why I teased it as being slightly painful is because of the news. I think it was Jeff Carlisle had on Blue Sky this week. Grim news from Vancouver Whitecaps CEO and sporting director Axel Schuster regarding the sale of the team. The team has been for sale for 14 months. There were 100 outreaches. Almost 40 took a deeper look. I believe that means signing NDAs to look over the finances and budgets and the like. Schuster said not a single one is interested in buying even 1% of this club. Brutal, says Jeff Carlisle. Shaking his head is Jeff Reuter. The Jeffs are not pleased by this news, is what I'm taking away.
That's 2 out of 2 Jeffs who are kind of reading tea leaves and with similar levels of fluency, I think. It's really sad. Schuster went on to say the challenges we have and have raised cannot be addressed in a way that is really bettering our situation in a good way. And what he's alluding to is that they are like one of the last teams to have a venue-friendly leasing agreement. And what I mean by that is that there are teams, like at least 10 teams, that don't nominally name or own the stadium that they play in, but they have land agreements with their cities because they were built in the 2010s and 20s, where it's like you own it, and that helps for tax purposes and whatever, and for not needing to get the taxpayer to vote for this. But at the same point, we operate it and we have control over the naming rights, so it's functionally our stadium, right? And BC Place is one of those few places where MLS teams play where like they don't see concession money. Like they were dead last in revenue game day, and that is projectable because this is after the best season in the club's history, and they're still dead last in income, right? And it's a notoriously difficult city to find land in. And I know that we're saying this in a world where New York City FC and the Chicago Fire have found sites for their stadiums. Like Vancouver is really tough to be able to get, a stadium project envisioned and everything. And it's just so sad because I don't know if there was a better atmosphere at a game last MLS Cup playoffs than there was at BC Place when LAFC was in town and they went to penalties, right? Like that was just like the atmosphere of the postseason to me. And I was at like that Minnesota-Seattle series, which went gangbusters, but there was something different about the elimination nature that just made it rise to that next level on broadcast, and I can't imagine being there. And everyone who was at that game was like posting such positive things that just the idea of this team having to leave this market because of a lack of a stadium future is just such a grim indictment of where we've gotten to sports in the 21st century and late stage capitalism. It really is.
I mean, what do you feel like, Jeff, from what you've heard, are like the next steps here? Because there was the announcement that they were like theoretically, provisionally, maybe possibly looking at different avenues and ways of giving them a new home. But it does seem like the lack of like even just like parking revenue, they can't keep that. They can't keep a lot of like the match day revenue, as you said. It's a very small percentage. It puts them into a very precarious position, as evidenced by how many people don't even want 1% of the team. Like it's hard for me to see that news and not think that this is the kind of like. And I know we've had the relocation rumblings earlier and in last season and time before that. It just still feels like that is what is starting to rumble here, and I really don't like when that happens.
Yeah, it feels like it, doesn't it? And I think that you look at even the statement. What's interesting is that MLS is maybe more involved on the front end of this. Like if you go back to Anthony Precourt as the owner of the Crew and that situation, a lot of that felt like it was trying to happen behind closed doors, and then it was like once the door cracked open or someone heard through a window, that's when fans knew that they should be 2 heels on the ground about it. And MLS has been very transparent. They have been pushing, like on their national media list, pushing Whitecaps availabilities when Axel Schuster's going to speak, because these updates are very important to MLS for MLS. And I don't see it as like hey, you guys should be able to start laying the groundwork so that we can, like, more of just like we need attention on this, because we need to try to get anyone in Vancouver who would be interested in keeping the Whitecaps in Vancouver clued into what's going on. And it feels very intentional and sincere. Like this, I don't get any sense that this is, like, if you look at the map, if you look at the markets, whatever, you would say in a boardroom, I don't get a sense Vancouver is one that they'd want to leave. I don't get the sense that this club, with how they've operated, with the like history to the club, to the NASL predecessor, with the importance of Alphonso Davies' transfer in the modern history of MLS, you're not doing this to protect the Davies legacy. You don't want the club to fold before he retires. It's not like a like-for-like sort of association, but at the same point, it is a club that has had a role to play in the story of MLS in the 21st century. And I think anytime any fan base of any American sports team is being told, like, hey, because the rich folks can't figure out how much they're willing to part with to buy the land to build the stadium so you can keep having your team, so I guess you won't have a team anymore, that's a terrible place to end up, as a team and as a league. It really is.
Yeah, I think I don't disagree with Jeff on any of that, I don't think. I will say MLS has been quite public about this, and they have been attempting to draw attention to it, and I think succeeding, certainly. But it's probably not from the most altruistic of places, right? I mean,
no,
MLS is a collection of the owners that operate the teams in the league, and they get money when a new team joins the league because they get an expansion fee. They don't get money when a team moves from one place to another place, right? So if you're moving Vancouver to Las Vegas, which, again, I don't think we're being hyperbolic here by having this sort of discussion, just to be clear about that, as unfortunate as that is. If you're moving Vancouver to another city, that's not an expansion fee. That's a relocation. And so I think MLS would much prefer to expand the old-fashioned way and not do it by moving a team. I mean, it's not clear what's going down here. I mean, that Axel Schuster has come out and talked about these things publicly means things are bad for Vancouver. It doesn't take a genius to see all of that stuff. They're not in an attainable stadium situation right now. And that's what MLS has come out and said. MLS said that their stadium situation as it stands will, quote, I will limit, quote, the club's long-term future in the city. It doesn't get a whole lot clearer than that. I'm not saying that this is going to happen and that the team is going to move, but there was talk 2 months ago about this agreement that the Whitecaps had signed with the city about putting together some sort of stadium project at a plot of land called Hastings Park. It doesn't seem like there's been any movement on that from reading things out of Vancouver. There's a pretty pessimistic tone about that. Again, that could be false. There could be other things going on here behind the scenes that we don't know. Almost certainly there are. But yeah, this is a pretty bleak spot because it's hard to operate a team at this level without a stadium. Like USL teams have seen that, and MLS teams are operating on a different level. So I don't know how this ends, but as things stand, it doesn't look great.
The only thing that I'm still very confused by is, like, who is it? Is it government owned, BC Place?
I don't believe so.
Yes, I think so.
Everything I've seen is that the stadium talks have been with BC Place / a company called Pavco, which, to be honest, I don't know a single thing about. That could be a government entity or it could be something different. I believe it is not a government institution. It is something called the Pavilion Corporation, but it is entirely possible that is owned by
very evil. I'm not gonna lie.
It is, according to Wikipedia, a crown corporation of the province. So maybe I'm just completely wrong.
I think that's the only thing that I am truly stuck on, because everything else makes sense in just sort of a depressing way. My understanding is that land in like downtown Vancouver or the surrounding environs is very, very expensive and would require the obvious stuff that you go through when you build a stadium of rezoning and town hall meetings and getting approvals, and would take a very long time to get things moving. And then you have an ownership group, not one individual billionaire owner. They are obviously very wealthy, Vancouver's owners, but it still is a group that then has to make the decision, that has to figure out how to spend that money. It does not seem like the city of Vancouver wants to give any sort of money or like beneficial terms, having spent a lot of money to build BC Place, having spent a lot of money, I think, with Olympic spending. There's an idea that maybe the government doesn't want to have to kind of do any sort of financing of a stadium. a stadium that would cost probably 500 million Canadian dollars or more at a minimum. So it seems like there are understandable reasons why it is this obstacle. The obvious solution is to have like the terms of BC Place renegotiated, or because if you're BC Place, I'm assuming you could book motocross events and the like that we've had, then force the Whitecaps to reschedule games. But I'm assuming having the Whitecaps there playing is at the very least a positive thing and keeps them from having an empty stadium for large chunks of the year. So my assumption is that renegotiating those terms and making something happen would be the ideal way forward. But given how many people have looked at this and said the situation is untenable and borderline unfixable, it seems like that is not a possibility either. Yeah. And so that is where I think we come to there are no easy answers. There's no clear, difficult answer either, other than it seems like relocation, which is not a thing I really want to talk about or speculate upon because it's just such a difficult topic and an unfun topic at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think we're at the stage where we need to like dive deep into that, other than just to say it does seem like we have enough evidence from MLS that if a stadium situation isn't resolved, they're not going to just leave it, right? And it doesn't even sound like necessarily that Vancouver higher-ups are like content with this situation and think that it makes sense to keep this as it is now. So I don't know what the immediate future looks like for Vancouver. I mean, they'll be playing games at BC Place in 2026. What happens after that, I really don't know. And I don't think there's many people out there that do know right now.
I really hope there are, it looks like 5 group games, around a 32 game, and around a 16 game at BC Place at the upcoming World Cup. And I really hope that does some mid-90s Seattle Mariner things to the people of Vancouver, the rich people of Vancouver, or the politicians in Vancouver, to say, like, people like this sport, people don't want to have this sport leave, at the highest levels. And I would imagine that's part of why this is coming now, is that there still is that massive event on the horizon that then can, if you have 6 months of groundwork with a potential investor, either to buy the club, to look at helping with the stadium project, whatever, you can still say, hey, Canada plays Qatar on the 18th of June. Let's get a box. Johnny Infantino will love us if we buy a box. And let's go ahead and, because there's no way that they're getting that for free. And let's have these conversations there while you have a World Cup atmosphere and tell me that you don't think this is important. Like, I would imagine that timeline is feasible at this point, right? Like, but it makes sense to really kick that off 5-6 months before the tournament does, so that you have that hope window in the summer.
I like hope window in the summer. Should we end there on hope window?
We should.
All right. Well, Jeff Ruder, thank you for supplying us with a hope window. Greatly appreciated.
Or at least the acknowledgement thereof. Glad I could.
Atletico Madrid, I got there eventually. Thank you for all of the hope that you provide every day.
Hey, thank you, Taylor. I think we only mentioned Inter Miami a couple of times on this show. Don't worry. Jeff, the Guardian Ruder, has a piece out about Inter Miami that you should go read at The Guardian, where he works and is doing great stuff. Go read Jeff's stuff and everybody else's stuff over there.
And for SEO purposes, Inter Miami, David Beckham, Lionel Messi, Brooklyn Beckham? I think we've ticked all the boxes now. We're good to go.
Of audio SEO becoming a thing. That's terrifying to me.
Let me just say the phrase Suarez bite, and I think that we've hit all of our boxes.
Good.
Yeah,
that's excellent. All right, we're set.
All right, we're set. Nicely done, gentlemen. Listeners, thank you all so much for listening. As always, we'll talk to you again very soon.